Alright, y'all, it is time for the 2023 Spanish Grand Prix observations. The working title for this video is going to be Lost Luster, a Dwindling Fight, and Meta Shifts. We have potentially seen a meta shift occur at this Grand Prix. Perez's title fight is dwindling right now, if it ever was a title fight. And the reigning world champion has lost some luster, along with some other curiosities from the weekend. Well, a few curiosities. We had a bit of a mixed grid. There could be various reasons for that. There isn't really one that can be pinpointed watching the weekend again. But anyway, let us get into this. I'm going to start off with the circuit alterations, and the chicane in sector 3, or the slow section in the final sector, was removed, and we have gone back to the classic layout of the Barcelona Catalunya circuit. And it really is the classic layout, because even the second hairpin has gone back to its classic layout. It's funny. It's funny they had Tilke waste all this tarmac trying to redesign circuits or parts of circuits, and he just gone back to the classic layout. You couldn't have, you could have just not changed. You could have just not changed anything over the years, and we would have been right back where we were. But anyway, it's all in the efforts of improving overtaking and what have you. Well, the prior changes were also in that same vein. Funny how that works. Funny how Jackie Stewart has been proven right. Should I call him Sir Jackie Stewart? Let me call him Sir Jackie Stewart. People gonna think, you're being hypocritical. You call Sir Lewis Hamilton Sir, but you don't call the other knights Sir. It's whatever. But yeah, it's funny how Sir Jackie Stewart has now been proven right in his past assertion that, you need long sweeping corners in order to create overtake. It's very funny how that's come full circle. And what was everyone calling him at the time? You're not a circuit designer. You're uninformed, misinformed, yada yada yada. Well, is he wrong now? Who knows? Now is when people are probably going to say, that's just the formula, but people have been slandering the formula for the longest. Anyway, that's all on the circuit alterations. It's just very interesting to me that we are back to the classic layout of the Spanish Grand Prix circuit. But I digress. Alright, so on to Red Bull, and the first big highlight or low light of the weekend, however you want to see it, was Perez going out in Q2. Now, I can't exactly pinpoint a reason why Perez has gone out in Q2. I can't exactly pinpoint a reason why a few drivers have gone out in Q2. A few drivers in this observation. But he went out in Q2, and at this point his title fight is all but over. Right, it's all but over. It's a dwindling title fight. We'll call it a dwindling title fight for now, because, as ever, there's still a chance. There's still a chance, but it's an increasingly slim chance off of a chance that was already slimmer than the most anorexic model you could find on some catwalk somewhere. But here he is. Here be Perez. Have Red Bull once again sabotaged him this weekend? Perhaps it hasn't been the same sabotage as at Monaco, I suppose. Although it would be a constant work throughout the season, sabotaging him here and there in Grand Prix by not exactly maximizing his setup. But it is funny that towards the end of the Grand Prix, Perez was getting the full radio encouragement. When it's funny, he gets the full radio encouragement when he's racing against anyone not named Verstappen. If he is racing against Verstappen, I don't know, they probably give him the radio silence. I'd love to have the full radio from the Miami Grand Prix, but anyway, that's for the history books. Someone somewhere will probably post that when the when the copyright laws fall away on all of that, well, on all of that content. I'm not allowed to post that shit just yet. But I mean, Perez is really in hot water now, especially if the Mercedes is really as good as it looked at Barcelona. He's really in trouble now. Make no mistake, he's really in trouble now. Now it's going to be a situation where he has to beat both the Mercs, and it's just unlikely that he does that if the Merc is anywhere close to the Red Bull. It's just unlikely. Or even worse, he has to really bust out his racing chops against the likes of Sir Lewis Hamilton and George Russell. George Russell, who may or may not be driving recklessly, and a Sir Lewis Hamilton who is 8 championships, 9/9/10 championships vetted. He's not going to have an easy time racing against these guys. It's not going to apply to Maximilian Verstappen because he's just going to be so fast in the package, and Red Bull are going to give him the works at every weekend. They're not going to leave his setup with any holes in it. They're not going to give him a setup with any holes in it. Anyway, on to Maximilian Verstappen, who got the win. A really quiet Grand Prix from him. There's not really much to note from him. Yeah, he did get the black and white flag. That's whatever. That's whatever to me. Why did he get the black and white flag? He was running wide at turn 5 and turn 10, or on the exit of turn 5 and turn 10. And that can probably be attributed to the fact that his front tires were overheating under braking. The front tires get too hot, a little less grip going through the middle of the corner or out the corner, and that's probably why he ran wide. But anyway, Maximilian Verstappen has lost some luster on the radio. Well, in post-Grand Prix at least. He's lost some luster on the post-Grand Prix radio. It's been there for a while. This isn't the first Grand Prix where it's been a thing, but it's been there for a while where he wins the Grand Prix and he's not as excited on the radio as he used to be. Right, the wins, of course, meant more when he actually had someone to race against. He had no one to race against. He was just racing against himself. I'm sure anyone who's played any F1 game, anyone who has played any F1 game, and they've put the difficulty at what is considered a challenge for them, or relative to whatever skill level you are at these games. And there's come a point where you are comfortably faster than that skill level. Well, are the wins gonna mean as much? Who knows? But at that point, you're really racing against yourself. You might just be running time trials during the Grand Prix, trying to see what the fastest lap you can actually lap, trying to see what the fastest time you can actually lap at is. And well, that's all he was really doing out there, Maximilian Verstappen. That's all he was really doing. He didn't have anyone to race against. He was racing against his own lap times and the circuit. That was it. And so post-race on the radio, he's not as excited as, well, he probably should be. It happens to most multiple world champions. Did even happen to Sir Lewis Hamilton for, I don't know, the 5th and the 6th championship, somewhere in there. But anyway, we'll see what exactly happens with Maximilian going forward. Likewise, the Orange Army probably needs to conscript more foot soldiers. They were a bit short. They were a bit short on human resources. Yes, they had a few people in the stands. Who knows? Maybe they just weren't wearing the orange. Who knows? But the Orange Army, a little bit short on men. A little bit short on men over there. So we had a smattering of orange. We'll see what happens going into other Grand Prix. Who knows? Maybe the Orange Army is even feeling the whole economic pinch right now, and they can't make it to every Grand Prix like before. Who knows? I'm not particularly going to talk about what's happening with the global economy in this video. I mean, you can feel it. You can feel it. You know exactly what's happening. You know better than any of the people who can actually make a plan to attend the Grand Prix what the heck is happening with one, the global economy, and then two, your local economy. It's happening global right now. But anyway, alright, on to Mercedes. And well, George Russell has had a bit of a mare of a Saturday. Well, he's had a nightmare, real nightmare of a Saturday. One, not only is he out in Q2, but well, just before the session ended, he was blocking his own teammate in the final two turns. That was wild. I'm not entirely sure how commentary didn't pick up on that, because that who knows? I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they weren't looking at the screen at that time. They were looking at the timing sheets. Who knows? Maybe that's what they were doing. And then of course the collision, you couldn't miss that. But yeah, George Russell was blocking Sir Lewis Hamilton in the last two turns. It's all good to say the team should have informed him that, well, the teammate's coming up behind you, but well, I'm not entirely sure if that would have changed how George Russell approached that situation. Right, that's just it. I'm not entirely sure it would have changed anything. Now, of course, they've collided on the straight after coming out of these final two turns, and George Russell has not gotten a final attempt at getting out of Q2. Look, George, he is he's picking up all the wrong optics right now. Literally just all the wrong optics. I'm not entirely sure what we do with him going forward. Of course, Mercedes are going to keep him. He is their golden egg for the future, as it were. This is absolutely not Mick Schumacher. It's not Baby Schumacher. Baby Schumacher, he's just, like I said before, he's there to attempt to sponge some racing knowledge off of the likes of Sir Lewis Hamilton and George Russell in terms of how to be fast. But otherwise, I mean, has this changed any outcomes for Mercedes on Sunday? Probably not. Matter of fact, it's probably made things easier for them, but I digress. I suppose one thing that should be noted is that since these upgrades, quote unquote upgrades, since Mercedes have gone to traditional sidepods again, Sir Lewis Hamilton has been the faster qualifier. Now I'm waiting for more Grand Prix to actually cement that, well, that specific meta shift as concrete. But for now, alright, the last two Grand Prix, the Spanish Grand Prix and the Monaco Grand Prix, Sir Lewis Hamilton has been the better qualifier. It's anyone's guess why. Right, anyone's guess. Now, George Russell, I've got to mention this with George Russell. He's escaped another penalty. This guy just keeps on dodging penalties. I'm not entirely sure how. Of course, okay, it's turn 1-2 off lap 1. There are going to be some liberties given, of course. But he's essentially overtaken two cars by going off circuit. I'm not entirely sure how there's been no reprimand at all for that. I'm not entirely sure how that's happened. I can't pretend to know any sort of knowledge on this now, but I'm not entirely sure how that's happened. Mind you, Alonso was talking about this last year or the year before regarding the new rules and the new rules and lap 1, turn 1 lap 1 at Barcelona, and that new runoff area, penalty area that they've cooked up over there. And well, he said it then. Now we've just seen a driver execute on it. Okay. Has Russell done that knowingly? I can't exactly tell you. I can't exactly say. They haven't penalized him. We didn't get a replay of it either. That's really where I start asking questions. That's the smoke signals for me, when we don't get a replay of something that probably should be a penalty. One thing that's very important for this Grand Prix, and this is where the meta shift has potentially occurred, is that the Mercedes upgrades are more viable than the first look at Monaco would have suggested. And this has pretty much caught everyone off guard. It's caught Red Bull off guard. Well, it's caught Perez off guard. It's caught one half of the Red Bull garage off guard for sure. It's definitely caught the Ferraris off guard, and it's probably caught Aston Martin off guard, although we haven't actually gotten to see the real pace of Alonso at Barcelona. There's reasons for that. We'll get into those later. But regardless of all of that, these upgrades are a lot more viable than the first look would have suggested. I would have expected Mercedes to pull out this performance at Canada, where we go next, or well, just any other circuit other than Barcelona. The fact that they've done it at Barcelona is quite promising. It is quite promising. Mind you, they've got their own communications director, Lord over here. I forget his first name. I forget the man's first name. But that Lord, his surname is Lord? Goodness me, okay. But he claimed that the lower track temperatures on the Sunday actually helped Mercedes. We'll see if that's the case. Mind you, Canadian Grand Prix might also get cancelled on account of the wildfires going on there, so we might not actually get to see it. We might not actually get to see it at the next Grand Prix. But anyway, one other observation is George Russell panting on the radio while asking Mercedes to try the one-stop. I'm putting this here because it's really funny to me, just browsing the YouTubes and what have you, and you come across a video of Sir Lewis Hamilton panting on the radio, and well, people want to say he's getting old or what have you. You know, Max Verstappen has been panting on the radio, George Russell. Everyone's going to be panting on the radio at some Grand Prix. Depends how hard they're actually pushing. That's all. Just depends how hard they're actually pushing. People want to say Sir Lewis Hamilton's getting old. Oh, look, he's panting on the radio. He must be getting old. No, he's just driving the wheels off that thing. He wasn't actually panting on the radio at this particular Grand Prix. I'm talking about previous Grand Prix, past Grand Prix, last year, year before, what have you. Particularly 2021, people want to... The Maximilian fans want to get themselves into a furore over this type of stuff, but I mean, they're just highlighting a real lack of knowledge as to what exactly is going on inside the cockpits of these cars. And it's work in these, it's real work inside these cockpits. Make no mistake, it's real work inside these cars. But anyway, George Russell, he was working so hard he mistook his own sweat on his visor for rain. I'm not entirely sure how that's happened, but well, it's George, innit? He's spending too much time looking for any sort of edge he can get on Sir Lewis Hamilton, but hey, I'll leave him to it. I will leave him to it for now. Regarding the Mercs against each other, George Russell was indeed trying to catch Sir Lewis Hamilton on the final stint. He almost burnt out his tires, and had he burnt out his tires, well, Perez probably would have secured third place. I'm not entirely sure what they would have told him on the radio. We didn't get that radio, but they did probably tell him to just simmer it down over there because hey, the tires aren't gonna do what you think they're gonna do. But anyway, Sir Lewis Hamilton secured himself second on the podium, well, on the rostrum, by pitting 10 laps after Sainz. Now you see, this is the thing with a Sir Lewis Hamilton versus the rest of these drivers. And I'm not particularly referencing Verstappen, although Perez could probably do something similar to this, although not at quite a high pace, not at quite a high clip. And that is, Sir Lewis Hamilton is able to drive the car really fast while still maintaining the health of the tires. I mentioned this in Australia, I suppose, where George was a bit kerfuffled by the pace that he was expected to run at, because, well, he was trying to preserve tires, and excuse me, George, you're racing a bit too slow. You're at the front of the field, you're racing a bit too slow. You might want to preserve your tires, but you got to drive fast and preserve your tires. You got to do both at the same time. That's what the creme de la creme of the grid do. Perez can preserve tires, but he's not going to do it, like I said, at as high a clip as Sir Lewis Hamilton or even Maximilian Verstappen. He's just not going to do it. In science, he's got other problems cooking for him. I'll get to that. But really, the main takeaway from this Grand Prix from Mercedes is that their upgrades look a lot more viable than anyone would have expected. Even themselves. Even themselves. They did not have a race plan to try and secure second and third. That was not their race plan. They had to alter that on the fly. And it's another thing that it's Mercedes now with the upgrades that look viable, because like I've said before, Mercedes and their operational excellency, they're gonna make this car look a lot better than it actually is. And this is where the likes of the Ferrari duo, Perez in particular, and probably the Aston Martin duo, although mind you, Stroll was having a difficult time keeping up with keeping up with the high level of drivers that are in front of him regardless. But yeah, on account of Merc's operational excellency, the car is going to look a lot better than it is, even if the upgrades are quote unquote viable. Even if. And we can only see what happens as the season unfolds from here. That's really all we can do. And there's a whole lot of details relating to the repackage that has gone into this W14B spec. They've even had to change where their suspension arms are mounted. You know, there's a lot of work that they've done There's a lot of work that they've done to make this thing real. But it's here now. And you know it's here because Sir Lewis Hamilton is really opening the taps, and George is having a difficult time keeping up with him. But we'll see what happens going into the next Grand Prix. Of course, George has started out of position for this one. There's going to be people who will say, oh, but he got so close to Sir Lewis Hamilton at the end. Who's to say that he wouldn't have finished ahead of him or what have you if they were closer on the starting grid? Well, who's to say? We'll just have to see what happens. But anyway, that should be Mercedes covered. On to Ferrari, and one big talking point about their weekend were their new sidepods. Ooh, Ferrari brought new sidepods. Now, I'm going to tell you just right off the jump, I'm not entirely convinced by Ferrari's new sidepods. They've gone with a half and half. They're trying to keep their scooped out sidepod concept, but give it the downwashing effect that Red Bull and Aston Martin and now Mercedes have. They're trying to do that, and well, I'm just not convinced by it. It doesn't look good. It just doesn't look good. They probably would have been better just keeping the old sidepods, well, the entire old spec of car for this Grand Prix, rather than try to run these new sidepods. But hey, Freddy Vasseur seems to be quite convinced that they can half and half their sidepods. He seems to be quite convinced by it. I'm not entirely sure why he's convinced by it. Me as Joe Public, I'm not. It doesn't look good. You know, it doesn't look good on the eye, and then after that it doesn't particularly perform out on circuit. So of course what's going to be pointed to is that Sainz is qualified on second on the grid, and if Leclerc, well, who knows what was wrong with Leclerc's car. I'm pretty sure nothing at all was wrong with it, and the car just does not sit well with him. But hey, we'll see what happens in that regard. Leclerc, he was out in Q1. Never mind going out in Q2 like Perez and George Russell. He was out in Q1. And there was some chatter about something not being quite right on the back end of his car. They rebuilt the entire car overnight from Saturday to Sunday, and they sent the previous back end back to the factory for analysis. I'm pretty sure the factory is going to tell them nothing was wrong at all, or they'll release some news piece as to what exactly was out of whack with the car. I don't believe anything was out of whack. That's just me. They'll release some news. I'm not entirely gonna buy that news. I'm not gonna believe it. But they'll release some news saying X, Y, or Z was wrong with the back end of Leclerc's car from the weekend, and that will be that. We'll just have to see what happens going forward for them, assuming they even keep these new sidepods, which I just don't see them doing. If they do, then I don't know. Freddie Vasseur's throwing his weight around and he doesn't want to be undermined or something. Anyway, heading into the race, I mean, yes, Sainz has qualified on the front row, but it didn't exactly reap any dividends. Now, heading into the race, Leclerc has not made the expected progress through the fields during the race. He's just not at all finished where he would have been expected to finish driving a Ferrari. Mind you, all Sainz was doing all Grand Prix was slowly moving backwards, being overtaken by a few cars. Well, was overtaken by Perez, who started well down. And really, that for me is the litmus test of Ferrari's altered concept. That's really the litmus test for me, that Sainz even finished behind the Perez. It would have been one thing if Sainz was mixing it with Sir Lewis Hamilton and George Russell and the Mercedes. That would have been one thing. But instead, he's been unable to hold on to them. It looks like either he, Sainz, or the car is not particularly kind to its tires, so he hasn't been able to get the tire mileage that, well, he would have wanted, the team would have wanted, or what would have been expected. Or Ferrari are just fluffing on strategy. It could be either of them. Sainz has gone back to being very nice with the pit wall again. He only gets fiery with them. He only gets fiery with them at Monaco for whatever reason. Okay, I wish he could maintain that type of attitude at all the Grand Prix, because they probably would have run his strategy different. Right, Sainz even questioned the early stop, but he did it anyway. I would love to have the full radio to know what exactly the team told him in regards to what that stop would do for his race. But yeah, he acquiesced anyway. Just like he acquiesced at Monaco anyway. Perhaps they gave him a dressing down in the debrief after Monaco. Who knows? Who knows? Drive to Survive might know sometime later. But otherwise, who knows? It's either Sainz has not driven to the expected delta, or the Ferrari repackage has missed the mark. I think it's more likely that it's missed the mark, because Leclerc hasn't had a good time in this Grand Prix anyway. And mind you, regarding Ferrari and how they run strategy, Leclerc was told to move out the way of Sainz, despite Leclerc about to pit at the end of that same lap. I think I'm of the belief that they would have done better to just leave the pair, well, not the pair, just don't give Leclerc the instruction to get out of Sainz's way. Sainz probably would have had DRS coming down the straight. That would have been worth more lap time than getting out of his way where he did. That's just how I see it. Mind you, I don't have all the data that these teams are using, but that's just how I see it. That probably would have been better racing for them. But hey, this is what Ferrari have done. They've gotten the result that they've gotten. There's no podium. There's no podium, and they probably should have gotten the podium. But anyway. On to Aston Martin and Alonso. He is just... Well, is he the unluckiest Spaniard at the Barcelona Grand Prix? Well, probably. I mean, he did damage his floor in qualifying. You know, this is why I say we didn't actually get to see the full pace of Alonso at this Grand Prix, pending whatever Aston Martin have done with their car for this Grand Prix. But we haven't gotten to see the full pace of it because Alonso damaged his floor in qualifying, and he's in parc fermé at that time. And likewise, it's a whole floor replacement. They're not actually going to commit to that. They'll fix it with some duct tape and call it a day. Mind you, they had to do that a lot, allegedly. They had to, well, I say allegedly, it was reported, so I should say reportedly. Reportedly, they had to do that a lot during just the qualifying session. Throw some more duct tape on it. Of course, they can't do that during the Grand Prix, but anyway. Why is Alonso getting bad karma at the Spanish Grand Prix? Well, there's reasons. One, he did not condemn his own fans for busting out the blackface. You know, me myself, I don't particularly care about blackface. I mean, one of the best comedians that I've seen in my life is South African, likewise. He does blackface all the time, Leon Schuster. People are gonna say he's racist? I don't know if they can do that. Everyone here laughs at his comedy. You know, it's just good comedy at the end of the day. But I understand that sentiment is not held across the rest of the world. Well, particularly in the West. I'm not entirely sure what they do in the East, but anyway. So here be Alonso. He's getting some bad karma. And well, that will probably be the rest of his career. That will probably be for the rest of his career, particularly at Barcelona. He might rock up to Barcelona in the Red Bull and everything might go wrong, you know. That's just the way the universe unfolds at the end of the day. Right, but Alonso, he's been very nice with Stroll at the back end of this Grand Prix. Very nice. Of course, he had to get familiar with the damaged car and then, well, race it into a passable position for Aston Martin's expectations. But he's been very nice when he drove up to the back of Lance Stroll and said, oh, he's not going to race Lance Stroll, he's just going to sit behind him and let him get on with the race. And this tells me that Alonso smells opportunity down the pipeline at Aston. Not only have they announced the engine deal with Honda, not only have they announced that, but they've just announced, what is it, Aston Martin that have made some technical personnel acquisitions? I believe it's Aston Martin and McLaren, but I might be fibbing on the Aston Martin portion. But either way, Alonso smells opportunity down the pipeline at Aston, so he's going to be very nice with the owner's son. Mind you, he was also in a damaged car anyway, so he was probably not particularly interested in starting a whole race with Lance Stroll. And he might lose control of the car and take them both out or what have you. It's a different thing when you're racing against someone in the same car versus, he's overtaking an Alpine or one of the all-sorans that are in the field. I don't want to call them all-sorans, but this is how it is relative to the rest of the field. But yeah, very interesting that Alonso is being so nice with Lance Stroll, the same way Lance Stroll is being so nice with Alonso. A fascinating tandem cooking up here. We'll see just how long it lasts. We'll see just how long Alonso actually lasts in this F1 thing. He could probably go till he's 43 or 44. Maybe even 45, who knows. But we'll see what happens with it. We'll see. There's not really much to report on Lance Stroll. I mean, he had a bog standard Grand Prix. I suppose he's now found some form after these last few races where he's really been out at sea. Right, from Miami, Monaco, and what have you. He's lucky we didn't go to Imola if he was still going to be off form there. It's quite lucky. But anyway, that's really all there is to say about Aston Martin. Stroll, bog standard Grand Prix. Alonso, a compromise Grand Prix. Onwards to Alpine. Alpine have had a standard Grand Prix. I want to say Alpine have had a standard Grand Prix. I know Gasly has had some problems over the weekend. He's been another one who's been a surprise elimination early in qualifying. But otherwise, Alpine have had what can essentially be considered a bog standard Grand Prix for them, considering their finishing positions. I mean, they both made the top 10. That's really all they can really be expected of them. That's That's partly the minimum and the maximum expectation. If they do anything different going forwards or backwards, well, either they exceed expectations or they or they're well below expectations, one way or the other. The only thing that's worth noting about Alpine was Ocon's very late defense against Fernando Alonso. And it's funny, Brundle talks about he hits some switch on the back of his head when he puts the helmet on, and he becomes a bit of a monster in the race car. Well, then I'm gonna tell you right now that he's letting slip that Ocon is indeed an MK asset, but it's all alleged. It's all alleged. But otherwise, Ocon, very late defense on Alonso. There is probably a reprimand that he should have gotten for that. Of course, nothing happened, and well, we'll just move on to the next Grand Prix for Alpine. Mind you, they'll probably have a strong result somewhere soon. I'm pretty sure somewhere soon, but we'll see what happens for them. On to Alfa Romeo. Alfa Romeo have changed something on their car. They weren't exactly the focus of the weekend, so I'm not particularly sure what they've changed on their car, but it does look different, a little bit different. Well, the styling on the sidepods looks a bit different to what they were running in previous Grand Prix. And here in Barcelona, Catalonia, they have opted out of running the Sunday test session. I suppose they have indeed brought some sort of upgrade to their car, and they wanted to see where they actually stacked up in the hierarchy. Now that they've done their test Sundays, as it were, now that they've completed their test Sundays and brought the first Audi vetted upgrade to the car. And well, they were rewarded with a P8 finish from Guan Yu Zhou, and it was all on merit. It was really all on merit. Of course, yes, Gasly is out of position. Doesn't really matter. Tsunoda has picked up a penalty. We'll talk about that penalty later. And Bottas has applied some of his knowledge as the quote-unquote B driver to slow down Guan Yu Zhou's opposition. It's funny that commentary was talking about how Alfa Romeo might not want the stewards to hear that radio call. I'm not particularly sure why. Like, that's just racing. I mean, if that's the case, then I'm not entirely sure what we are supposed to do about Perez in Abu Dhabi 2021, where he was told to hold up Sir Lewis Hamilton. I'm not entirely sure what we're supposed to do about that, because that was just racing as far as I know. Likewise here with Bottas slowing down, who was it? Was it Magnussen or Hulkenberg? One of the Haas's. It was one of the Haas cars. That's just racing. You're allowed to do that. I'm not particularly sure what commentary we're on about, but hey, Brundle has been making a few odd comments on commentary. I only pick out the good ones, but hey, he's been making a few odd comments on commentary for the last few Grand Prix. Probably for all the Grand Prix that he's been on commentary duty this season. And probably a few last season, but otherwise, that's really all there is to address with Alfa Romeo. Show P8. I mean, look, let me actually mention this about Guan Yu Zhou. He's driven a really solid Grand Prix here in Barcelona. Really solid. Really. He has been. Has he overtaken Bottas in the internal team hierarchy? I don't believe so. But boy, he got that P8 all on merit. Well, let me not say on merit. He probably should have finished P9. I don't believe Tsunoda should have gotten a penalty, but we're about to get into AlphaTauri after this. But otherwise, it's all on merit. And that is not something that I saw for Alfa Romeo, well, for the whole season, with the way they were running the season. Of course, here I am assuming that they've brought upgrades of some sort, and they've decided to drop the Sunday test session to get some real data in terms of where they actually are in the pecking order. Do I expect this to be maintained? going forward into other Grand Prix, not particularly, but hey, we'll have to see what happens. It's snakes and ladders in the midfield anyway. One weekend you might be somewhere near the top, the next weekend you might be you might be in the last two positions, you might be in 19th and 20th, who knows. I'm sure FOM and the powers that be would love that to be every Grand Prix in regards to the order at the front, but that's just not going to be the case. Onwards to AlphaTauri, not much to report on De Vries. Like I said with the snakes and ladders analogy for Alfa Romeo, he's really suffered with the snakes and ladders things. One second he's up on the opposition that he's racing against, the likes of Haas, the likes of Mclaren, of course Williams or Newey, and the likes of the Alfa Romeo, and the next second he's fallen behind them. You know, it's a bit of a snakes and ladders thing. At least he's getting to learn while racing in a pack, I suppose. That was not exactly pack racing. All of a sudden the oval race is going to get on my ass over that. But anyway, Tsunoda has had a bit of a harsh penalty given to him. There was this scenario where he was defending against Guan Yu Zhou, and Zhou got, I don't even want to say pushed because the cars didn't touch, but well, Zhou decided to take to the escape road because there wasn't going to be enough space for him to actually make the corner. I'm of the belief he could have made the corner and he just would have had to shuffle in behind Tsunoda, but anyway, he's picked up a bit of a harsh penalty by my assumption. It's funny to me, Brundle changed tack regarding the penalty when Tsunoda got penalized. At first he said that there was nothing there. There was nothing there to penalize Tsunoda over. And then as soon as Tsunoda got penalized, he said, yeah, it was a bit over the edge. That's a bit... Brundle, you're going to have to be a little bit more consistent. You're really going to have to be just a touch more consistent, brother. But anyway, it's a P12 finish for Tsunoda. He is still not netting his P10s and P11s again. Perhaps that sequence of the season is over for him. Who knows? I suspect it's going to come back for Canada. Mind you, I actually can see AlphaTauri getting a P8. He was supposed to finish P8 here in Barcelona, Tsunoda, but well, it just hasn't happened. He got the 5-second penalty, ends up finishing P12. He's made Leclerc's race look one position better, as Leclerc was supposed to be P12. He ends up P11 in the final analysis. Likewise, Gasly was supposed to be P11. He ends up P10 in the final analysis. You know, this is just the way the cookie crumbled. But otherwise, Tsunoda seems to be having a recurring issue with his brakes late in the Grand Prix. First instance I heard about it was Monaco. I don't believe it's happened at any prior Grand Prix. He might have had something similar happen to him in Saudi Arabia, but Saudi Arabia is not particularly taxing on the brakes. But yeah, Tsunoda's brakes were letting off brake dust. For the last 20 laps of the Grand Prix. 20 laps, I want to say. Not entirely sure if that's particularly accurate, but somewhere in that region. His brakes were letting off brake dust. It's very interesting seeing the brake dust coming off the cars nowadays. It's not like in do I call it retro? It doesn't even feel retro to me. But it's not like in the retro years. The late 90s, early 2000s, where cars would be letting off brake dust. The main time you would see the cars spitting off brake dust was generally when they came into pit, and the tires got changed, and the wheel gun would stir the brakes and kick up a whole lot of brake dust. It doesn't really happen anymore, or it's contained by the wheel caps. Who knows? It definitely wasn't contained by the wheel caps when out on circuit. Like I said, that was quite interesting to see, because I just haven't seen brake dust coming off the cars like that for a while. Usually when you would see brake dust coming off the cars in recent times was when the brakes had failed outright. That's really when the cars would spit brake dust. I believe there was a Toyota a few years back. I might be mistaken on it being a Toyota. Yeah, but there was a car a few years back at Canada, at the Canadian Grand Prix. Was it Yano Trulli at the wheel? It might not have been Yano Trulli. But anyway, that's the most recent I can recall of poof, brake dust exploding out of the out of the wheel. Although that was a brake failure as opposed to just excessive wear on the brakes. But anyway, that's really all there is to address with AlphaTauri. De Vries, he's, like I said, he's just learning. He's just learning. He had a quiet Grand Prix. I suppose he didn't get into any trouble with anyone, so he had a good Grand Prix, all things considered. Because it would have been very easy for him to collide with one of the Haas cars, or Mclaren when he was overtaking Piastri, specifically when he was overtaking Piastri or whatever. It would have been very easy for him to collide with someone, and it just hasn't happened. Anyway, on to McLaren. And McLaren have had a bit of a high tide in qualifying. They have absolutely out-qualified the car. Norris and Piastri were not supposed to qualify in the top 10. I'm not entirely sure what sort of circuit conditions came together for Norris to land P3. But all things considered, McLaren had a really high tide moment in qualifying. It was never going to maintain into the Grand Prix. Although Norris has been he's been partly unfortunate and partly clumsy in this moment where he's damaged his front wing against Sir Lewis Hamilton. Had he been perhaps more experienced with being near the front, although I don't actually buy that whole Brundle shtick of him not having the snapshots in head of what it's like starting near the front of the field. I don't entirely buy that one. I just don't buy it. You see, Norris, he had space to actually tuck in behind the likes of Sainz and Verstappen. I mean, Sainz, he got a mega start, right? Sainz, I'm sure whichever feed you were watching, they would have put that graphic up of Sainz and Verstappen having the same release time after the lights went up. But there was space for Norris to tuck in there behind those two. He hasn't actually done so. I'm not entirely sure how pressured he was by Sir Lewis Hamilton off the start line. I'm not entirely sure about that. It's more like he just left the door open for him. But anyway, Norris, he did not recover from his early wing damage. That was his race over. I'm actually surprised that McLaren pitted him. They had not gotten the black and orange flag yet, and I suppose, was the front wing damage extensive enough for him to, need to get it replaced right away? Who knows? Of course, he was dropping back down the field, but they probably would have been better off giving him the 2 laps. Give him 2 laps, maybe 3 laps out on circuit before you pit him for the repairs. They probably would have been better off doing that. But anyway, they pit him immediately, and he just didn't recover. Piastri starting in the top 10. What was he, P9 at the start? He just slowly crept backwards. There's not really much that can be done about that. Really, there's not much that can be done about that. That's just the car. That's just where the car is. McLaren would have much preferred Norris to have actually, of course, he was going to drop back regardless of what happened with his front wing there, right? Whether he did damage it or not, he was going to drop back, but they would have preferred that Norris not actually pick up the front wing damage and need a replacement, and be able to just get some data as to where their car actually is relative to the front. They would have quite appreciated that data, but well, they just didn't get it. They didn't get it, and Norris didn't recover any position. I mean, that was his race done. That was his race well and truly done after that moment. But anyway, on to Haas. Not much to note about Haas. I'm still not going to call it the quote-unquote white Ferrari. their styling of the car hasn't quite sold me on it being an ape of the Ferrari concept. But either way, Haas might be regretting trying to copy the Ferrari scoop side pod, seeing as Ferrari themselves are now trying to move away from it. They might just be regretting it just a bit right now. But anyway, there's not really much to talk about Haas. Their drivers had as clean a race as could be expected, and the only thing that was of interest was that their rear jack kept failing in the pit stops. I mean, that's a bit of a funny one for me. I'm sure they'll embark on some redesign of their rear jack now, and we'll see what they bring out for the next Grand Prix. But otherwise, they lost a whole bunch of time on pit road just on account of the rear jack failing multiple times. It failed on both cars. But anyway, there's really not much to discuss with Haas. Gunther might probably want it to stay that way for a few Grand Prix. Well, we go Canada next. There might be a lot to talk about Haas after Canada. But anyway, on to Williams. And Williams are waiting for the next low downforce circuit because their car is indeed a low downforce jockey. To this day, since Bottas was there, it's been a low downforce jockey. Since Felipe Massa was there, it's been a low downforce jockey. Right? They still haven't quite designed that characteristic out of the car yet. But anyway, this serves well for them, seeing as we go to Canada next, low downforce setup in Canada. I would expect Williams to do well there. If they don't do well, then, well, who knows really? Who knows? There's not really much to report on them. Albon and Sargent were as close to each other as they would be expected to be. Well, Sargent has actually done well keeping up with Albon. He's actually done well keeping up with Albon on race day. But that aside, they were nowhere. Could they have been running a Sunday test session? Nah, I doubt it. Didn't look like a Sunday test session for Williams. Just looked like their car is not built for it's not built for medium to high downforce setups. It's just not built for it. I would expect a good result I would expect Williams to finish, well, Albon to finish somewhere in the top 10 for sure at Canada, maybe even just 10th is what I would expect. Will that happen? Won't it happen? Who knows? We'll see what happens. Alright, I'm gonna do a bit of a stewards review here, as I find it very fascinating when the stewards are overly enthusiastic with the red flags. They were very enthusiastic with the red flags in Q1. I'm not entirely sure why. I can't particularly tell you why. But yes, they were quite enthusiastic with waving the red flag in Q1 for some gravel that got into the circuit. Again, with this gravel thing, it's a bit of a muchness for me. Some people might say otherwise. Oh, the tires are under such heavy loads that you're gonna go pop as soon as they drive over some gravel. Okay, can run that. You know, they can only run that for so long until the cars actually drive over gravel. Mind you, we've seen the cars drive over gravel already in Australia, right? But anyway, very overly enthusiastic with red flags. I would love it for the stewards to just slow down on their red flag deployments. They did the same thing at San Marino either last year. No, it was definitely last year. Who was it that ran wide? Was it Leclerc that ran wide at one of the turns in San Marino? I was one of the Haas drivers. They were very enthusiastic. It was Magnussen that ran wide at Imola. They were very enthusiastic with the red flag there. They're always very enthusiastic with the red flags in qualifying. I'm not entirely sure why they do that. I wish they would stop with it. I wish they would stop. It's always very annoying TV when they do that. But anyway. Alright, time for some notes from commentary. And we got some... we got some interesting / controversial notes from commentary this time. Brundle has dropped, well, one questionable suggestion and another really fascinating suggestion. The most fascinating suggestion is that Brundle claims that Adrian Newey is more valuable than the best paid driver. Now, I'm inclined to agree with him, seeing as, well, we've been handed the formula that we've been handed, where it's a make formula, and, well, if you have the fastest car, and all the cars are designed to make overtaking easier, if you have the fastest car, you're going to be well up the field, if not at the head of the field. So I'm inclined to agree with him on that take. Is Adrian Newey worth more than the best paid driver? Not exactly, because he can't drive the car. If he could drive the car, he would definitely be worth more than the best paid driver. Well, in anger, right? Any of these people on the pit wall could drive the car, but they wouldn't be anywhere near the pace. They just wouldn't be anywhere near the pace. But if Adrian Newey could drive the car anywhere near the pace, well, he would probably be worth more than the best paid driver for real. But right now, as just a car design genius, quote unquote, he is probably worth more than the best paid driver. Just on account of Maximilian Verstappen is not doing what he's doing without Adrian Newey's input on the car. It will be very interesting to see what Red Bull do once Adrian Newey calls it a day. Or heck, he might get poached by someone else. He may very well get poached by someone else, right? Aston Martin could poach him, tell him he's going to design a supercar for Aston Martin. Alpine might poach him, go design a supercar for Alpine. Anything could happen. Quite frankly, anything could happen with Adrian Newey, but it's very unlikely that any of those things happen. What's most likely is that he just signs another deal with Red Bull, because Red Bull seems to have enough reach with the manufacturers to, well, there you go, Adrian, go design a car for Aston Martin or what have you. We got a badge deal with Aston Martin. You can go design a car for them. Got a badge deal with Ford, go design a car for them. Got a badge deal with Honda at some point in the future, go design a car for them. Anything could happen in that regard with him staying attached to Red Bull. But hey, this Red Bull thing is all going to come crashing down soon enough. I don't want to say it too loud. I just want to let reality cook. I just want to let the universe cook and chef it up. But yeah, this thing is going to come crashing down soon enough. And one other suggestion by Brundle, well, another piece of commentary by Brundle is that he has suggested DRS be limited to 100 seconds per Grand Prix. Now look, there's enough gimmicks in F1 right now. Rather than limit the DRS to some arbitrary time on a Sunday, why not just get rid of it? Forget about limiting the DRS, just get rid of it. If you're not getting rid of it, then you're definitely not changing it from what it was. Well, from what it is, I should say. Not from what it was, because we are in the present right now, but you're definitely not changing it from what it is for a limited DRS. Oh, you get 100 seconds of DRS per Grand Prix, you gotta use it tactically. No, no, sir. This is not A1 GP. Anyone remember A1? Countries racing against each other, and they had limited shots of the turbo boost or what have you. This is not A1 Grand Prix. Please, just you either get rid of it wholesale or you just let it run as it is, and perhaps police FOM on on where they're shortening the DRS zones. Perhaps police them on that. But otherwise, another note regarding DRS: David Croft has sprung a bit of a madness over here. I don't know how he's allowed to say that on air, but he's pondered why DRS is allowed in qualifying if it's an overtaking tool. Here's the situation with allowing DRS in qualifying. The whole point of qualifying is to see the cars at their maximum. It would be a huge problem for It would be a huge problem for F1 if, well, you had one of the cars lap the circuit faster during the race than they did in qualifying. That would be a huge problem, because then you're not seeing the cars at their maximum in qualifying. So that's why DRS is allowed in qualifying, even if it's strictly quote-unquote an overtaking tool. Right? They know this intrinsically in the back rooms. This is why they run it the way it is. Even if they themselves wouldn't be able to say it with words, this is why they run it the way it is. Of course, they would be able to say it with words, because they're that smart collectively in the back rooms. But yeah, DRS is allowed in qualifying because the whole point of qualifying is to see the cars at their maximum potential, at their zenith. If we are not getting to see the cars at their maximum potential in qualifying, then you lessen the value of qualifying. It was a different thing before when DRS was first being introduced, and the DRS would just be open on every straight. That was a different thing, although mind you, we're pretty much back to that type of situation already with the way DRS zones keep getting added to circuits. But that was a different thing back then. Now they've understood the DRS a bit more, and well, you need the DRS to be open in qualifying. You simply need it. You simply need it. It avoids the entire optics of, oh look, the cars go faster during the race than in qualifying. It avoids that entire optics because there's no justification for those optics right now. There just isn't. Yeah, you might have someone put on fresh tires towards the end of the Grand Prix and they try and get the fastest lap or whatever. You might have that situation occurring. That's one thing, because the track would be the most rubbered in at that point. But it's a completely different thing if halfway through the Grand Prix they're already lapping faster than they would be in qualifying, just on account of, oh, you got some DRS at a timely manner. Perhaps while lapping a car, so that car jumped out of the way. You didn't have to actually affect an overtake with that DRS. It would just be messy. It would just be messy. You'd have the media jump on it. You'd have fans jump on it. Oh, why are the cars going faster in the race than they are in qualifying? You just have people jump on it. People already jump on stupid things right now, right? Without even realizing that they made it this way. People already jump on stupid things right now, such as, now it's a bit too easy to overtake, and so whichever car is the fastest car is gonna overtake everybody. It's been this way since 2014. Since the real concerted push to make overtaking easier, and we had those tiny ass rear wings, those box rear wings and what have you. Right, it's been the case since then that, okay, we've made overtaking so easy that whichever car is the fastest is pretty much guaranteed to drive up to the front of the pack and just lead the race from there on. It's really been instituted since then. But otherwise, I'm getting off topic. Crofty pondering why DRS is allowed in qualifying. Shh, don't say that too loud. Don't say that too loud. You're gonna fuck up the whole show. You're gonna fuck up the Saturday show for us. If some big wig at FOM decides to actually lock off DRS for qualifying, you're gonna fuck it up for us, homeboy. Slow down over there. But otherwise, that should be the observations. I do not believe this is going to be an aftermath. It's not long enough to be an aftermath, and I just haven't given this Grand Prix that much build-up. I haven't given this Grand Prix that much build-up or that much importance this season. Mind you, it would have been a different thing had Mercedes actually brought their debuted their upgrades, their sidepods, for this Grand Prix. It would have been a different thing. Because then I'll also have to deal with Ferrari's new sidepods and what have you. But anyway, that should be the GP observations. Lost luster. Maximilian Verstappen losing some luster on the post-Grand Prix radio. A dwindling fight by Sergio Perez. And meta shifts because, well, this Mercedes has seemingly shifted the meta. And Aston Martin might be a bit gazumped by Mercedes in the next Grand Prix. But anyway, we'll see what happens. That should be the vid. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Peace.
Hell breezy. Let me show you how to keep the dice rolling when you're doing that thing over there, homie. Hey, let's go! Cause I'm feeling like I'm running and I'm feeling like I gotta get away. Better know that I don't and I won't ever stop. Cause you know I gotta win every day. Go! See, they really wanna pop me. Go! Just know that you will never flop me. And I know that I gotta be a little cocky. Go! You ain't never gonna stop me. Every time I come a nigga gotta set it, then I gotta go and then I gotta get it, then I gotta blow and then I gotta shut it. Any little thing a nigga think that he be doing, cause it doesn't matter, cause I'm gonna dead it. Then I'm gonna murder everything and anything about it. Boom, about a bing. I gotta do a lot of things to make it clearer to a couple niggas that I always win, and then I gotta get it again and again and again. And I be doing it to death, and now I move a little foul. Nigga better call a rap, and everybody know my style. Niggas know that I'm the best when it comes to doing this, and I be banging on my chest, and I bang in the east, and I banging in the west, and I kinda give you more, and I will never give you less. You will hear it in the street, and you can read it in the press. Do you really wanna know what's next? Let's go. See the way we on it, and we all up in the race, and you know we gotta go now, try to keep up with the pace. If we struggling and hustling and set it, and I get it, and we always gotta do it, take it to another place. Gotta taste it, and I gotta grab